Príjemný dobrý deň všetkým. Dovoľte, aby som vás privítal na dnešnej prednáške pani Shelli Brunswick, and now I will switch into English because we have decided that we want to be very polite to our guests. So welcome, Shelli, and welcome, Christina. It's our pleasure to have you here. Mrs. Kristina Kohutová is from the Embassy of the United States of America in Slovakia, located in Bratislava. And Shelli Brunswick is originally from the United States. So we are very glad to have you here. And it is my pleasure on behalf of the University of Žilina to welcome our guests at the University of Žilina. And as we have the transportation in our hearts, this is very important for us. We welcome presentations. They are connected academia and industry, and especially how to implement the knowledge from academia into industry. And that's what you will hear today. Now, I would like to ask Christina to introduce Shelli, and I wish you a very nice discussion later in the end. And Shelli also prepared for you some cards to be signed, so if you are interested in the end, and please ask questions. It's an important part of the discussion. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. As always, we are so happy to be back here with different presentations, and I know that you will have a lot of questions. We will have more than enough time to answer all of them. We are happy to do so. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Shelli Brunswick. She's a global strategist advancing innovation and economic competitiveness in emerging technologies. She served as a U.S. Air Force officer in space acquisition and national policy, including as a professor at the Defense Acquisition University, and later as a legislative liaison to the U.S. Congress. She went on to hold senior executive roles in the global space sector before founding SB Global LLC, advising governments and industry on innovation-driven growth. So give it up for Shelli, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to join all of you. And we're going to kind of walk through some things that I call an interstellar guide to success. We have it up there. And some of the things that are required to make that happen. There we go. So I like to walk around, but we're going to stand still because we're also recording for our audience as well. So I will do my best to not fidget too much. And again, thank you so much. So the big thing I want to share with you as we get started is I did not know I'd be in the space industry. I mean, you already know you want to be in transportation, so you kind of have half that battle won because you already know you want to be here. But when I was growing up, I didn't know I wanted to be in the space sector. Being in the space sector when I was growing up wasn't even a reality. It wasn't a possibility like it is today. And we're going to talk about those opportunities that exist now. So during my career, things pivoted. First I joined the Air Force right out of high school. I then got my college degree while I was in the Air Force going to school at night. I was stationed in Germany and Turkey, so not so far away from here. Then became an officer in the Air Force, retired from the military, went into the space sector, and now I'm an entrepreneur, like I know many of you want to be. So during that course of my life, you're going to have your career change course or pivoting. So you don't necessarily have to have it all figured out. You just kind of got to figure out what the next steps might be. And we're going to talk about how do you figure that out? How do you create a plan? How do you maybe get to where you want to be, even when you may not know what you want to be? So I got a couple pictures here. I always like to say, who knows who Buzz Aldrin is? Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon. Okay, I'm just checking because I have talked to people who say, I don't know who that is. So this is when I retired from the Air Force, working on Capitol Hill. Those were members of Congress at the time that were at my retirement ceremony. And then when I went into industry, I also not only worked with Congress, but I spent more time at the White House. And so this is actually a room in the White House where space legislation was signed into law by the President of the United States. This man right here is Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon. We have two other cool astronauts, but you probably care that that was Buzz Aldrin. So it kind of tells you these things I never imagined would be possible when I was sitting in your seat. But because of how you take steps that prepare you today, tomorrow, and the next day, they can lead to paths that you didn't even know existed. So we're going to talk about what I call the Interstellar Guide to Success. Hold on, I know. And we do have the cards, so when we get done, so everything I talk about is in this book, and we're going to leave a copy with the rector as well, so there'll be a copy here at the university, but I'll be happy to sign any autographs you want, but it's really about looking at your career path in 4 steps. It's about leadership, and that's self-leadership. It's about awareness, not only awareness about yourself, but awareness of what's available to you. And then it's about creating access points, because sometimes we don't know there are access points into what we want to do or what we're excited about. And then it's about how do we take action? Sometimes that's the most important step. And I know some of you are entrepreneurs, and so we can have great visions and great ideas, but you really got to be able to execute. And again, that's about taking action. So we talked about that first step, leading yourself. So when you first start out, you may not be leading a team. You might be leading yourself, self-leadership. How are you leading yourself? What are your steps? You're the CEO of your business right now. It's you. What are you doing to improve your leadership style and self-leadership? Because when you can lead yourself, other people want to follow you. They want to be on your team. They want to be inspired by you. So I have a few leaders that I interview. So it's not just my perspective from the space industry, but I have also talked to leaders from around the world and kind of shared their perspective on these activities. So it's not only from the space mindset lens, but it also transitions into what you're doing today. So I have 3 amazing leaders, and I'm going to talk about Professor Simonetta. She's the former director of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. So the UNUSA, how many have heard of UNUSA? That's what we abbreviation call it, the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. That's a mouthful. So UNUSA is right down in Vienna, so it's not very far from you. But the great thing about UNUSA is they do a lot of programs for people that are interested in not only space, but space technology as it cuts into different industries. So they have space and agriculture, space and water, space and law. Any lawyers in here? Anybody want to be a lawyer? How about space law? How about diplomacy? I know I'm getting we need all those careers in the space industry, but they're from other sectors. So ANUSA is really exciting, but what Simonetta talks about is being a leader means you need to know when to lead from the front. Sometimes you got to just step out and people will start following you, but also means when other people are ready to lead and you need to step to the side or step behind to let them take their leadership. And that's also about your leadership. How do you create your pathway forward in leadership and doing self-assessments? So one of the people I kind of highlight about that, and some of you want to be entrepreneurs. How many people want to be entrepreneurs or are thinking about being entrepreneurs? A few, you want to start your own business. So this is Sir Peter Beck. He's from New Zealand. When he was growing up, he wanted to come work at NASA. But there are some challenges sometimes with international citizens, and he was not able to secure a position working at NASA. So you know what he decided to do? Start his own rocket company. So he built his own rocket company called Rocket Lab. He now sells Rocket Lab launches to the United States to include NASA. And he has the business is not only in New Zealand launching, but it's also in the United States launching. So sometimes the path you think you want, he wanted to be that NASA scientist and work at NASA. He created a different path, became an entrepreneur, and he still gets to be affiliated with NASA. So sometimes your first path may not work out. You just need to pivot a little bit to get there. And that's what Sir Peter Beck did when he pivoted. So I put a few questions up, and I think they have the presentation. So you have the presentation as well. But these are just some things, or you can take a picture because I'm not going to ask you to give me answers back. But these are just some things to think about as you're thinking about your self-leadership. What future are you building for your company And again, your company could be you. That doesn't mean you have to create a company. You're the company. I'm the CEO of Shelli. What company am I building for myself? What future am I building for myself? How do I respond when things go off course? You know, how do you respond when things don't work out the first time or the second time? You know, SpaceX had multiple rockets blow up before they became successful. They almost went out of business. They almost went bankrupt. So, but they kept going and they learned from each of those failures. So instead of thinking of failure, just think of fail. First attempt in learning. So how do you overcome things when maybe they don't go your way? How do you adjust? Do you get upset? Or do you internalize? Do you pull back? Or do you reevaluate, learn from it, and try again? So, and who are you looking to for guidance and support and mentorship, but also who's already following you? Who's watching you? A younger brother or sister, or another junior student who's watching your leadership. So not only are you looking for people, but people are already watching you and your leadership and wanting to follow you. And if you're a CEO or want to start a company, you are going to be that leader of that organization. You're the vision center, the visionary leadership. You're setting the way. You got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to inspire people. You've got to be upbeat even when maybe it's a bad day for the company, your rocket blew up. So these are all things you have to think about as you're developing your leadership style for your future or as you develop your future company. So one of the things I love for people to do is a SWOT analysis. Again, we're not going to go through this, but a great picture. A SWOT analysis, a lot of times companies do it, but you can do it for yourself. What are your strengths? What are you good at? What are your weaknesses? What could you improve at? What might be the opportunities that are available to you as you start your journey in life or for your business? And what are the threats out there? Are there competitors? Are there disadvantaged times? Is the market down? Is the market up? So it's always great to do a SWOT analysis for yourself every year, as well as for your business, and set your course. So now we'll kind of think about, as we thought about self-leadership, now we're going to go to that next phase, which is awareness. So now that we've built awareness about ourselves, self-awareness through doing the SWOT analysis and where do we want to go, what are the opportunities, how do we want to improve, now we can look out there and say, what's out there that's available to me? Because sometimes we don't know. And if you don't do that self-assessment, all things can be opportunities and it can become overwhelming. So it's really good to know, what do you do? So every year I like to do a vision board. What are my priorities for this year? How is that helping me accomplish where I want to be in 3, 5, 10 years? A lot of opportunities come in, but sometimes you have to say no to them or not right now. And you got to be able to prioritize. So you can't do that without that first step of self-leadership. And then the second step is what we are now, which is building awareness. So I have 3 leaders we'll look at who are building awareness. And what I'd like to highlight is Alma. So Alma is the director for World Space Week. How many of you have heard of World Space Week? How many would like to know more about World Space Week? Okay, so World Space Week takes place every year in early October. It's designated by the UN and the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. Just about every country in the world participates. It's online, so you can participate virtually as an individual, or you could create an online program, but there's also country activities that go on as well. So there's opportunities to check out. I think this year it's about rockets. So they always have a theme. So you could talk, hey, aren't you guys transportation? Sounds like rockets might tie into that theme this year. You could probably come up with some really cool things to do here at the university. So World Space Week is one of those opportunities that helps you learn more about the space industry. But the other great thing about the space industry is it's international. Sometimes we only think of space as the US or China or Russia or maybe ESA, but it's really global because whether you think about it or not, you're using space technology every day. And I'm going to let you think about that. We'll come back to it. So you're using that. So when I talk about Alma, she was a lawyer and then became the executive director for World Space Week, but she didn't start out in space. Space was not a possibility. I think she took a class on space, and and an opportunity said, "Hey, we need a space lawyer." And she's like, "Well, I took a class," and they said, "Good enough. Come on." So sometimes you try something and it opens a door that you never knew existed, and now she's leading World Space Week. So as we think about what can that mean, you can now take that. We did this one. We did this strengths, weaknesses. No, this, so now that you've done the strengths and weaknesses, you can say, and this is more just take a picture, now that you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, what are the opportunities out there? So obviously you're in the university, you're getting formal education for your strengths and weaknesses, but there's also online activities. Maybe there's a workshop. Some of you said you want to be entrepreneurs. Do you all have entrepreneurial programs as well during your formal academics? So you do. So, but some people also take online classes. Maybe you need to figure out how to do a spreadsheet or a P&L, profit and loss. Some of those things you could maybe look at Zoom, talk to a professor, figure it out with some other activities, because, there's a lot going on. You don't necessarily need to have an MBA anymore to have a business, but you do need to know how to do some skills, money in, money out, profit or services. You need to have the basic things. So the other thing I'm going to share is the power of storytelling. So when we think about storytelling, especially as an entrepreneur, it all starts with the first thing, the why. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? What's your motivation? Why does it matter to you? Why do you care about that product or service you're offering? What's your story? Because when we think about the products and services, think about the commercials you see. They're trying to connect with you in a way that's personal, in a way that has meaning and value to buy their product or service. And so whether you're an entrepreneur or you're selling yourself, you're going to graduate college, you want to go work for an employer. Why do you want to work for that employer? I met a student yesterday, and he came up and said, should I get an aerospace degree, or I'm getting a mechanical degree right now? Should I change into aerospace engineering? And I said, well, why? Why would you change? And he goes, well, I like this one company and they're doing this space technology. And I said, well, have you called that one company and asked them, who do you hire? Do you care about the degree, or does that matter? Or what are the skills? So if you're thinking about where you want to work, do you know who you want to work for? And how do you want to sell your story? Are you passionate about what that is? Some people, we met with some students earlier, they want to have a business, but how do they finance it? And I said, well, sometimes you have to have a side hustle. Normally when you start a business, it's your own money. It's your money and family and friends initially. We call it bootstrapping. And sometimes you have to have a regular job, and you then do that. You start your business on the side until you can grow and develop it enough that you can leave your job. So there's lots of reasons why you want to do something, but you have to have that passion statement. You want to be able to connect with people. So that's the first part, the why. And we'll talk about the other parts of creating a business, but the first one is the why, and that's your story. We have a few leaders here that I'll highlight. And I'm going to go with Rod Pyle, because Rod is in the space industry, but he's not a traditional space person. He actually started in movies, making movies, writing books, and then he was always excited about space, always excited, ever since he was 8 years old and Apollo was happening. You've all heard of the Apollo program, right? Yeah, 60 years ago, Apollo, and now we're doing this new thing, you've heard of it, called Artemis? Yeah. And some astronauts just came back, and we're going to do a few more missions, and you all are part of that with the Artemis Accords. Slovakia signed the Artemis Accords, and we're now going to partner together on a permanent moon presence, and we'll talk about why that's important. So, but Rod was excited about space, but there wasn't really a lot of opportunity in the space industry for artists. There were some TV shows and stuff, but he eventually started creating short movies, writing books. He's now a commentator on various things. He does have a podcast, so if you're interested, he interviews some great guests on his podcast and teaches about space. But he's a storyteller, telling the story. And we think about the importance of arts. Think about the TV shows that started a lot of this. Star Trek. We had Star Trek, and then the first shuttle the U.S. built was called Enterprise. We can look at some of our healthcare technology. We think about Star Trek, some of the healthcare technology that's been developed, kind of inspired from Star Trek, our communication devices. Remember, they used to touch their shirts. We all have little communication devices we can beam down to any planet with now. So sometimes that first spark of innovation and excitement is coming from those storytellers. It may be fiction, but then engineers, I'm sure there are some engineers in this room that say, I want to make that happen. I want to create that technology. I want to make that a reality. So storytellers are sometimes, they give us the inspiration to try new things and reach beyond what may currently be possible. SpaceX, when they created a rocket, nobody thought that they would be able to create their own engine, to 3D print those activities, to lower the cost of launch. Nobody believed, even in the space industry, believed that that was possible. And they had multiple failures to prove that it was not possible until they made it possible. So be the dreamer. Try. You might fail, but sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from trying the impossible. And I can tell from those of you in the room, you're excited for the future of transportation. And it's not just trains, planes, and automobiles. It's also about space. It's about having a moon settlement. It's about going on to Mars. It's about creating new opportunities. And transportation is the infrastructure of creating the space business. You're part of building those, not only the vehicles, but it's also the future roads for what does it look like to become an interplanetary species. So let me give one example of storytelling. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, this is his storytelling, but he once described, if you think about Earth and you compare it to an apple, the atmosphere of the Earth would be equivalent to the skin of an apple. So you've heard a lot of people say the atmosphere is fragile or what's happening to our atmosphere, and astronauts talk about it. But when you think about our atmosphere as thin as the skin of an apple, it gives you a visual, gives you a story of how people not in the space industry can relate to understanding our planet. So I share that with you as you communicate with others. How do you communicate in a way that allows people to understand your dream, your vision, where you want to go? If you're creating a company, how you articulate that. Communication and storytelling is that first step of really creating your business. Here's some questions you can ask yourself. And again, I don't expect you to do that now, but you do have the slides for later. What story has shaped you? Why are you even here today? What made you decide to come into transportation? What's your origin story? You don't have to answer. These are just things you need to think about. When somebody asks you why are you here? Why are you getting this degree? What do you want to do with it? Where do you want to go? What kind of business do you want to create? What will it do? Why are you motivated to create that business? So now we're going to kind of think about the importance of role models. So in the space industry, we haven't always had a lot of role models, especially that are not astronauts or rocket scientists. We have rocket scientists, we have astronauts, you've seen pictures. But I also like to highlight who are the other role models? The lawyers, the space lawyers, the diplomats, the business leaders. So I do want to highlight, I'm a business person. I have a business degree, so I have an MBA. And when I came into the space industry, everybody was STEM professionals. So they were like, haha, you have a business degree. And now 20 years later, we're all wanting to build space companies, and it's, haha, let's partner. How can we change the world together? So you may have a technical degree, you may have a business degree, but you know what? We need to work together if we want to solve problems. And we call that interdisciplinary. So how do we bring different people in with different skill sets that help us solve problems? So when I was in the Air Force, I didn't tell you my origin story yet. We'll see how that works out. I was a program manager. So many of you might want to be program managers in the transportation industry. So I was a program manager working on space assets. But I was not working alone. I was the program manager, and I have contracting and finance and logistics and engineering. And you had all the team, and you would talk about your program. What are we doing? And one of the things you always have to do with programs is there's trade-offs between cost, schedule, and performance. Do I have people in here who are studying to be program managers? Maybe. So if you're in transportation, you're probably at some point going to be a program manager leading a program. So your trade-offs are cost, schedule, and performance. Are you going to give up performance to save cost or schedule? Or is it somebody's life is on the line, performance is 100%, we're going to slip schedule and we're going to pay more money? So those are your three variables, and you have to work that as the program manager with your team. So think about the role models that are out there, but there are role models for you to look up to. Who's already doing what you want to do? Can you follow them on LinkedIn? Do they have a podcast? Maybe you can even reach out and ask for an informational interview to ask them questions about how did they get to where they are. And then the other question is, who's looking at you as a role model? You're a big college student. Are there some high school students looking at you? Are there some underclassmen that are looking at you and your leadership and how you make it all look so easy? Sometimes we don't know we're role models, but we are. So as you walk the halls today, just think, who's watching your leadership style as you show them how to change the world? So I have a couple folks that are role models. So I'm going to highlight Dr. Catherine Nakalibi. So Dr. Catherine is a professor at the University of Maryland. She also runs her own research lab, and she is also the NASA Harvest Africa director. So many times it is unknown, it is an unknown, a program management term, that space technology is a great player in agriculture. Most people think it's just agriculture and space has nothing to do with it. So there's a number of things that go into agriculture. One is called precision agriculture, where GPS tracking or precision navigation timing are on the vehicles. So, and by doing that, you don't need to have a driver in the tractor, and it's plowing the rows perfectly, which can increase crop yield by 10%. It can also harvest, but then also as you're harvesting the crops, you're sending them to market, you're putting them on transportation, which is all being moved by timing and navigation from GPS satellites or equivalent satellites. So the whole system is running on GPS. We also look at, there's other activities, weather forecasting. So there are parts of the world that don't have weather forecasting. They're not connected to the global economy because we can't lay fiber optic cable to remote regions in Africa and Central America or remote islands around the world. We all take for granted weather. I'm going to run out of the camera real quick. We all have one of these. You all have one of these? Some of you might have two. And on them, you probably all have weather forecasting. You all look at the weather. Can I run outside today? What should I wear? But for farmers, this can mean life or death. This can mean whether their crops succeed or fail. So in the US, we're having a massive drought in the West. This is impacting farmers and their planting. How much can they plant? How much water will they have? It's going to reduce yield. Can they even afford to plant? In other parts of the region, a couple of years ago, Cameroon had massive rain, washed away their topsoil. So if you were a farmer and you planted, you lost all your money. And most farmers just live crop to crop, one year to the next. So if you can have better earth observation, we call that, with weather prediction, then you have a better chance of understanding how successful your crop might be, and you as the farmer can make better decisions. You can also use earth observation to determine how healthy your crop is. You can look at through satellite imaging and you can tell, is your crop have pests? Does it need water? Does it need fertilizer? And allows farmers to make educated decisions on how to use their resources. So Dr. Catherine through NASA Harvest works with farmers. She particularly works in Africa, but there are other regional directors in South America and other parts of the world that help farmers to better understand how they can use space technology to better increase crop yield, to better use their resources, and to better help themselves, their families, and their communities. Because it is number one, about food security. So I love Dr. Cyan Proctor. So she is an astronaut, but she was selected as an astronaut because she's an artist. So she does have a STEM degree. She's a geologist, but she applied to be an astronaut. So she's not in like a NASA suit. She's not a NASA astronaut. She's a commercial astronaut. So today the world has changed. Where we once had to go to space because of a government, now almost anybody can go to space for money or for other things. So Cyan applied to be an astronaut for a commercial crew for SpaceX that you may have heard. We have a new NASA administrator, Jarek Isaacman. She went with Jarek Isaacman. She was the artist on that mission, even though she's a scientist, and she did all kinds of art and wrote poetry, and she was also the pilot for that SpaceX mission. So there are both traditional ways and non-traditional, and she could now be a role model for somebody who says, hey, I want to be an astronaut, but I'm not going to be an ESA astronaut. I'm not going to be a NASA astronaut. I'm not going to be a cosmonaut. I want to be a commercial astronaut. I want to go to space because I want to develop healthcare applications that save lives. I want to go to space because I want to discover new things. So you now have opportunities to go to space in ways that were never imagined before. And Cyan Proctor is a role model showing that there are different ways to go to space, to include, do I have any artists in this room? I got a couple. See, and she's a STEM professional, geology, and an artist. You can be both. So a few questions you can think about for how do you do that? You know, who's influenced you? And then how are you influencing others? And so you can kind of say, what lessons have you learned from them? And what lessons do you want to leave for others? So we're now going to think about, we have our State Department team here. I'm going to talk about them during this session. It's really about creating now access points. So I talked about leadership, self-leadership, doing that SWOT analysis. I now shared that there are access points. There are programs, there's organizations you can join, there's role models you can find that you can start figuring out what's available to you and how do you find it. Obviously, the faculty here is amazing. You have librarians, you have online resources, there are innovation centers. So you can find information. So that's kind of your market research. So whether you're doing the market research because you want to be a company or you're doing the market research because you want to understand how you want to get to where you want to go. But now the next step is, where are the access points? Is that what most people, where's the access? So the first one is about policy. Policy creates opportunities. So I'm going to do, I've talked about this a number of times to my colleagues, so I better explain what I do with this group. So I'm going to talk about Dr. Mohammed Sharif. He's with the Islamic World Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So it's very similar to the United Nations Scientific and Cultural Organization. They do programs around the world in culture and science and technology. And so I participate with them in another number of programs that relate to entrepreneurship programs, as well as CANSAT, where we develop, you create small CANSATs, you bring teams together to create that excitement about the space industry, launching it, understanding the data. So they are a great organization to partner with. Dr. Sharif is actually a German citizen. He grew up in Germany, went to schools in Germany. So I'm kind of sharing that because he might be somebody you want to reach out to since he's a German citizen. And ISESCO, they partner both with members. They have 54 member countries, but they also have observer countries like India is an observer country, Brazil. So you have an opportunity to partner. They do great programs with universities for CANSATs, entrepreneurship and facilitation. They sometimes have grant programs. But again, that's a form of policy making. Not at the government level, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but at an organizational levels. The university can create policies that create access points. Organizations, whether they're companies or nonprofits, create access points. So ISESCO is one of those access points because they go to various countries around the world, and some of them are very underrepresented groups in emerging technology, I'll say. So some Burkina Faso, Azerbaijan. We've done a program in Turkey. We've done a program in Morocco, and they bring people in. So they're bringing in men and women to learn how to be entrepreneurs, to learn how to create businesses. They provide a little seed funding. So they're one of those organizations that said, we're going to create policies and programs that create more opportunity for people to be entrepreneurs. And so universities and organizations can do that type of activity. So it's about policy making. Some activities you can do. I'm also going to talk about how governments create policy, because a lot of times that's what we think about in essence as governments. So before 2004, in the United States, you could not launch a rocket. You could not really build a rocket or launch a rocket. Only government could do that. Then in 2004, Congress and the president signed a law. I call it Commercial Crew. There's a formal name. And it allowed companies to now build and launch rockets. And hence SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, all these other rocket companies started. And what that did is that legislation not only created the rocket industry, but because industry was able to lower the cost of launching a rocket. So before, to launch a rocket for the government was here, SpaceX was here. You can ask ChatGPT or Google for the exact cost figures. But by commercializing the cost of rocket launches, it drove the cost down. So now not only was it less expensive for the US government to launch a rocket, it was less expensive for universities to launch a rocket, for healthcare institutions, for emerging countries to be able to launch their own satellite and rocket. So at a time when government has matured technology, creating the policies that transition it to the commercial sector create new opportunities for businesses, can lower the cost curve, and allow others to participate in that industry. So again, policy drivers can drive that legislation. Now, there is a new one out there. For those of you who want to be entrepreneurs and maybe in the space industry, I don't have the slide, but our team is here to talk about economic development. NASA has just launched a new program called Ignition, and it's about having a permanent moon presence. And there are 3 phases, and each of the phases talks about the technology that they're interested. And when I mean technology, it's technology that companies are developing, not NASA's going to develop it. And they've sent out a call not only to US companies, but to the Artemis Accords and allies around the world to participate. So for those of you who are interested, you can Google that, NASA Ignition Program, or Nick is here from our economic development team, and he's happy to talk to you about what those opportunities could look like. Maybe that's even a challenge for the university to look at how they could compete. Other universities compete, the University of Colorado Boulder and other universities in the US, so could be a great opportunity. It's a highlight that government sets policies, organizations set policies, you create policies that create access points. So now we're going to think about how do we drive that through. And this one's kind of directly for entrepreneurship, really thinking about how entrepreneurs are creating access points. So entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, are problem solvers. You see a problem, you have a solution, and you think your solution is better than anyone else's. That's what you are. You're a problem solver. Now, there are other parts and pieces you go through that, but as an entrepreneur, you could be a solopreneur. You could be a multi-thousand employee international company. So there's a wide range. You can be a startup. You could be a full-grown company. So there's lots of ways to do that. And again, entrepreneurship is one of those ways of creating access points. You can be an entrepreneur or you could partner with others. Because I already said, who are my engineers here? Find a business person, find a contracting person, maybe find an artist who can create cool things. You got to find a website designer. So to create a business, you're going to bring all those pieces together. So I'm going to talk about Crazy John. So Crazy John is from Japan, and he runs a startup grind Tokyo, but there are other startup grinds. That is a global kind of online incubator, and he creates not only businesses, but he's also an investor. And so entrepreneurs and investors are creating access points for you to come into the market. The other thing I want to share for those of you who want to be entrepreneurs, there is a great online program for you. It's called the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. They have 12-week programs. They're online, but they also have virtual programs, so you can take on demand. They have current things that go on. They also create mentorship opportunities. So again, entrepreneurs are creating access points and creating job opportunities and solving problems. But there's also programs out there to help you as entrepreneurs, both here in Slovakia, in the European Union, but as well as in the US and elsewhere, to help you create your business and launch your business. So now we're going to kind of keep looking at that access point. This will be our last one. We have to think about the path. So there's a saying, you know, if you don't know where you're going, all roads will take you there. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you're lucky. But what I've learned is preparation usually meets opportunity. So you create your own luck. So when you're thinking about, and again, yearly, I usually do a vision board. What do I want to focus on this year? Where do I want to be in 3, 5, 10 years? What could I do this year that's going to help me get there? How am I doing things I like to do, that I want to do? Sometimes you got to do things you don't want to do. That's part of being an adult. But hopefully you do more things you like to do. So as you're thinking about your journey and you did that SWOT analysis, and then you looked at what were the awareness and the opportunities, now you can kind of say, what's my focus? Because sometimes we're bombarded with opportunities, emails, text messages, WhatsApp, LinkedIn. By the way, I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me. I put even more opportunities on LinkedIn. But we have to kind of create that mindfulness and understand what do we want to focus on? And maybe you want to focus on something you're really excited about, but it's not a reality this year. So one of the reasons Elon Musk became an entrepreneur is he said, die on Mars, just not on impact. So that was his motivation for a rocket company, solar panels, a battery. The car company. So his motivation is to someday be on Mars. But that's not a dream that can happen today. So what do you do along the steps? And I have some other entrepreneurs I work with. They've got some really big dreams. They're really aspirational, but it's too soon. This isn't the right timing. So they put that out here. What can you work on now to eventually get there? So as you're thinking about your career, where you are in your program, maybe in thinking about starting your company, where you want to be, start laying that out and then start being mindful of what are the opportunities, where can you find them, what do you have to say no to right now? It's no, but maybe later. And what can you say yes to right now so that you can really stay focused on your dreams and where you want to go? So we have a couple folks. I want to highlight Hannah because this could be something that's insightful for you. Hannah is the managing director of the Carmen Project. So the Carmen Project offers fellowships. It's a highly competitive organization. They usually only accept 15 fellows a year. It's a global organization that looks at individuals who are doing things that solve something globally. Usually it has a space. The Carmen line is where we leave Earth's atmosphere and go into space. So that hence the Carmen Project is about space. They just closed out this year's applications and just did their selection. But if it's something you might be interested, do you have an idea solving cancer using space or Yeah, I mean, that was what one of the fellows was researching. This could be one of those programs that you check out, the Carmen Project, and look at how do you apply. So, because you may not get it next year or the year after, but some of the people have applied multiple times and eventually were selected for the Carmen Project. And it's a powerful network. They do some things where they get together, they go to the UK, they do some projects at Oxford, they do some other events in Mauritius, and they build a powerful network. So she's leading an amazing organization. She's out of Australia, I'll highlight as well. So the Carmen Project is one of those fellowships. And those are things you can look for. What are unique fellowships, internships, volunteer opportunities that can help you accomplish your goals and dreams? Few things you can look at and take a picture of the slide that gives you some things to think about. Now, as I said at the beginning, what is the most important part of this? Leadership, awareness, access, action. The most important step is taking action. Sometimes we do all the planning and all the preparation and all the vision and all the talking, and then we don't take action. Try, fail, try again. So we're going to talk about really taking action. And what does that look like? Well, it's about learning. And here you are, learning. So learning is the first step. And I have John Wensven, who's the president of International Space University. So again, you might need a formal degree, you might need an informal degree. Maybe you can take some online podcasts, virtual learning, you could volunteer, you could get a fellowship, you can get an internship. There are a number of ways to take action and to learn the skills you might need to follow through with your activity. Little slide that you can look at for learning or take a picture. I'm going to zip through. The next one is, we talked a little bit about, is building your network. So that means you've got to do more than just sit at your desk or go to class and go home and do your homework. You've got to get out there and meet people. Maybe it's online. You find organizations with like-minded thinkers, World Space Week, Space Generation Advisory Council, the Mars Society. And again, I'm giving you some space ones, but whatever you're excited about, there are organizations and people who love what you love. Find them, connect with them. I'm going to give you one that's right up the street. Well, I'm going to give one. I got one. So Lucas, and my team's heard about him. He is the president of the European Space Foundation. He's out of Poland. And so they're right up the street from y'all. They do a thing every year. It'll be coming up the end of August, September, called the European Rover Challenge. Are any of you interested in rovers, want to compete in rovers? You could be a competitor in that. They do university competition. They also have a conference during that time frame where they bring in space speakers. But what's really cool is next year, in October, during their European Rover Challenge, the International Astronautical Congress is going to be in Poland. And that is the largest and oldest space gathering in the world. So you are just down the road. I mean, how far is Poland? It's not far. You could drive to this major event. Maybe the university wants to have a presence there. You could meet with entrepreneurs and space leaders and talk about business ideas. And it's right here, right next to you. The one this year's in Turkey, so that's also not too far, but you could go to that as well in Turkey. But Poland it's just on the street, right? It's just on the street. And then I'm going to give you our last big takeaway. All the things I've talked about and all the things I'm sharing with you, this is called, I'm going to put this under mentorship. Some of the things that can help you accomplish your goals and leapfrog and accelerate your growth is if you find a mentor. Find someone who's done what you've done, who can invest the time in you. And that's why I shared the NASDAQ entrepreneurial program. There's another, I'm going to tell you about Women Tech Network, also has mentoring programs for startup companies and technology. And it says women, but it's open to men and women. So they have mentoring programs as well. So there's lots of programs out there that can give you some mentoring opportunities. Ingrid is from Colombia, and she helps mentor for displaced citizens. Sometimes people get displaced due to weather or other situations, but those people still create businesses, even in temporary facilities and locations. She mentors all kinds of individuals to create businesses no matter where they are. So there are mentors and there's mentoring programs out there, and those can help you accelerate your growth, not only for your career, but also for your business if that's what you want. And I kind of have a little slide on mentoring right here for you. So here's what I want you to do. This is your homework, because there'll be a homework. Your faculty will check on this. I want you to create your 30-day plan. So you can just take a picture. Obviously, I'm not going to check because you know what? It's not really for me. It's for you. This is about your future. So do a 30-day plan. Think about your leadership, awareness, access, and action. And that will help you find your next step and create the space mindset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stop. I think we have a few minutes and I can take any questions if you have some. Thank you again for your time. So if you have a question, raise your hand. We have another mic so that we can record the questions as well.
Please, this is my exercise for today, running up and down the stairs. Go ahead. Who has a question?
I can keep talking. I got more slides, so you might want to just ask some questions.
Anybody has a question at this point? Well, if not, we will be here for about 10 minutes, so come on up. Let's talk with Shelli directly. Thank you so much for doing this. This was very inspirational. I'm hoping you took a lot out of that. And yes, there were notes taken, so your homework will be due in 30 days. So that's right at the end of your semester.
And I do want to share that Nick is here from Economic Development. So if you want to talk about those business opportunities, as well as Kika can talk to you about those scholarship programs, educational programs with Fulbright, which is also online. So so there's several of us. And then I also have cards that resemble the book, and I'm happy to autograph those or sign those if you are interested. And we'll wait around for 10 minutes if you have some questions. So again, wait, can we take a picture with you? Yes?
Okay. We will do that. And then we will formally thank you, and you will be excused to do your homework.
Okay, I'm going to do the old fashioned. We'll do one like this. Okay, and now we'll do.
So everybody back in the back row, hi, you're here. Cool. Thank you so much again for doing that. Shelli, any last words?
I'll see you around the galaxy.
Thank you. Bye.